Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Literary Hour on Focus on Liberia. Um, we hope that you will join us for what appears to be a stimulating discussion on the nature of shadows. We're going to be discussing this book, and the author is here to discuss it with us, to tell us about his motivation and about his growth through the literary device of the novel. And again, we want to welcome Prof. Nangbe, who is my co-host and my teacher. Hi, Prof.
Jackie, good evening. How you doing?
I'm okay. How are you, Prof?
I'm fine, thank you.
Okay. And we would also like to welcome Augustine Sharif, who is the author of The Nature of Shadows. Hi, Augustine. How are
Good,
you?
good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much, Professor, and thank you, Miss Jackie, for having me here.
Okay. Before we start, we will give a brief interview because there are people who don't know who you are. So Augustine Sharif is an aspiring poet and memoirist. He was born in Liberia, where he completed high school. He was class valedictorian before moving to the United States. He completed his undergraduate studies in social work at the University of Texas in Arlington. He is currently completing his graduate studies at the University of North Alabama. Mr. Sharif is the author of the award-winning memoir, The Nature of Shadows, an African memoir, and he is currently working on a collection of short stories and poems for publication soon. So welcome. We're happy to have you here this afternoon.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you. Wow, you captured everything so beautifully.
Okay, so we will get into this novel. Some of you did purchase this, and I hope you join us in discussing the nature of shadow. So, Prof, let's start with this buildings roman. If Dennis can put the second slide up, we'll start. So, Prof, tell us about the literary device that Augustine used in writing this novel.
Well, a couple of things are at work. The first thing is that it is often important to make connections in every one of the sessions we have here. Some time ago, we talked about life stories. We talked about life stories, and particularly we zeroed in on autobiography and biography. Autobiography meaning a life story as told by the individual himself or herself, and biography as the life story told by another person on another person. Um, so that if I did the life story of Jackie, then I'm writing a biography. And if Jackie decides to write her own life story, then that becomes an autobiography. And yet, the important thing about these literary forms is that there are certain versions that are few and far between. One of which has to be, for instance, memoir, which zeroes in on a specific time period in the individual's life. And that is where memoir comes into the picture. But then we have to, because actually there are so many things that run into each other these days. Novel, uh, in a specific sense, had been set out for a literary creation of an extended narrative where the author draws from pure imagination, right? But of course, it's come to a point now where it's accepted that a book of, say, 6 by 9 water view, a pocket-sized water view is generally called a novel, even if it is a non-fiction type of thing. So we see that we probably will be using this literal word, interchangeably to mean both fiction and non-fiction. So probably one of the things that will be coming out of our discussion here is to probably get insight into the extent to which this book is largely non-fiction. In other words, a realistic recounting of this gentleman's life, or that for some reason there have been some shades of fiction for whatever reason that will come out in our discussion. So I'll lay it out there.
Thank you, Prof. And for those of you who are just joining us, we're trying to situate the nature of shadows in the literary canon before we start discussion. So we know that this is a coming of age novel, right? In the same way, To Kill a Mockingbird, Mark Twain, in the same way, we watch movies and we say, oh, at the end there's a resolution. So this is a coming of age novel, a Bildungsroman, and the definition is that was that a maturing of the individual, a build up of the individual that goes through trials, experiences, and come out a different person. Sometimes the setting may change, sometimes it may not. In Mr. Sherry's case, it did change, but in all of the incidences and events that happen to him, there is this maturing process that goes on, right? It happened to him. And so we're going to dig deeper. But first, I would like for Mr. Sherry to tell us, why did you write this memoir?
Well, again, thank you so much for letting me come on your platform to talk about this book. I was in a very dark place back in 2016, and that place, it just reminded me so much about places I had been before in terms of adversity. And so, what I had decided to do was to start journaling, just to journal some of the experiences I was going through. And it was in that process, as I began to journal, I was able to look at it one day and I said, man, this can literally just be a whole book. And then I got afraid. I got really scared because putting yourself out there when you write this kind of book, there's a lot of information you're putting out there. But the one thing that kept motivating me was it is not about me. If one person can read the book and just have that transformational change that I might have received, I thought it was enough. And that is why I did it.
Okay, I apologize. I think there is an echo we're trying to get rid of, so bear with us. Can you all hear me well, or do I? I think there's an echo. Okay, so this book is very interesting because, and we will come back again to the literary device of Bildungsroman and the different characteristics that you have throughout your novel that makes this a coming of age novel. It's very interesting because, I mean, normally, and it doesn't take anything away from the novel. In fact, it made it very interesting for me that it started and then it kind of shifted, and I was like, oh wait, let me go read my Esther again. Oh wait, let me read Doris. So it kept going back and forth. But the interesting thing is, at the end, kind of all the chapters fit. They fitted into this whole. So I'm like, now I understand. I understand this now. Oh, I understand what happened here. So the coming together of the different pieces, this discovery of self that you have throughout the book, this discovery of self. When you decided to write the book, when you started to write the book, was it your intention Prof, could you please mute? Was it your intention to do it as different chapters like that, shifting, or how did you come about to write it this way, to write it so that it is almost, the Buildings Were Meant is like a journey. You're going on this journey and you're following the author and all of the trials. How did you come about to write it so that there's this almost puzzle-like pieces, right? This is coming together, and you're asking the reader to put these pieces together to understand the person who is Baba Sharif, right?
That's right.
Yeah, but so how did you come to decide on this way of writing your novel?
Well, thank you. That's a very interesting question. I think when I first started, what I had intended was it was going to be in the form of a letter to each of those characters. I was going to write a letter. I would take Doris and write her this page as if I was sending her a letter, how she personally impacted my life. So each of those characters, when you come to look at it at the end of the day, each of them had significant influence in my life personally, whether it was for good or bad or whatever the reader perceived. I was going to do a letter, but it was just so vast that I wanted to make sure that at the end of the day, all of those pieces, like you said, like a puzzle, they have to fit into the narrative. How did that impact me? How was that all about me? And how will it impact someone else who reads the book? And so that was the whole idea behind it, that I was going to address each of those individuals as if I was speaking to them on a one-on-one basis. And at the end of the day, I wanted the big picture to come out the way it did. So I think, yes, it was very challenging because one of my beta readers was my adopted parents. So I gave them the book, and I remember my mom calling me. She said, "This is just too much. I have to jump here, jump there. I can." So I just told her, I said, "Mom, just be patient, continue to read." But at the end of the entire book, she was able to call me back. She said, "This is well done," and so.
Yeah.
But I think that was the whole idea behind it, the way we wrote it. Yeah.
Okay. Prof, do you have a question for him?
They actually, anyone who happens to pick up a copy sees that you've really created an orbit, a vast orbit. And one of the first things that you come to someone's mind is to what extent, if you were to kind of slip in percentages, how much of this book is true? How much of this book is fiction? How much of this book is nonfiction? To start with.
That's a good question, Professor. Thank you. When I embarked on the project to write this book, it was just one of the challenges that I faced because I kept asking myself, will my readers actually find some of the stories in the book believable? So I really came to that point of believability. Will they find the stories believable? And to answer the question in short, 100% of what's in the book is all true. 100%. And the one thing that I wanted to do, I wanted to present the book in such a way that I got to a point that some things I had to think, maybe I don't want to include this thing. But I kept hearing some of my beta readers kept coming back to me, telling me it is good to stay true to your readers. So what you may think to be not worth reading, it's good to drop it in there and let's see what happens. And so 100% of the book is believable, is all true. And each of those characters that we mentioned in the book, I was able to reach all of them except Doris. I was able to reach all of them, and with the exception, of course, of those who passed prior to finishing the book, of course. But I was able to reach everybody and ask them personally, do you want me to keep your name as it is, or do you want me to, give you a pseudonym? And everybody so far, they were very receptive, and they said, look, keep the story the way it is, keep my name real, don't change anything. And I was very grateful for each of those individuals.
Evie, Esther.
Even my Esther, even my Esther. Today, that is one of my goals. I would love to go back to Liberia very soon to be able to reunite with my Esther, my Mata, to meet those people and sit and eat with them one more time before life take them away, because each of them have gotten really, really old, and we are still in touch. And yeah, I'd love to go back and see those people.
All right. And another piece before Jackie comes in. Uh, like I said, this is a vast canvas, an orbit you've created, which obviously is people with men, women, and children. If there would be one or two lessons from which demography of these people would you say you drew the strongest lesson? I'm talking about the men, the women, and the children. From which did you draw stronger lessons in your journey to this point?
Yeah, that is a very interesting thing, because in writing the book, I had to go back to my 4 or 5 year old self. I had to go back and imagine myself still sitting at my grandfather's feet where he's teaching me to read the Quran.
Mhm,
And I had to, at some point in time, shift and go back to that 12-year-old boy who was running away from home.
mhm,
But at the end of the day, the people that I drew the most inspiration from, believe it or not, will be the um, the young boy, the young kid, the young person. So I was even targeting an audience of just 18 to maybe 25 years old for the book. But then when you really come to look at it, you come to see that it is very obvious that the demographic was just not really significant as the story itself. And so, but if you would want me to quantify, like which demographic really had the most impact on me, would be that young teenager going all the way to maybe about age 25. That's the big place. Yes, sir.
mhm.
Um, uh, so when you're writing the book, and let's say we've situated the book now as a coming of age book, it's interesting how you flush out the characters in the book, because if you know each one of them, as the writer said, there's always something to love. Even with the little soldier who is about to kill you, there's one point where he helps you, so you see that even your father, with all the beatings you got, even Esther, there are elements of, what is it, not everybody is flawed. There's some glimpse of perfection, or humanity. Prof would disagree with me. It's not perfection, a glimpse of humanity in the character. So I like the way you presented the characters. also, if you when you're reading the book, you almost, I mean, you see it truly as a reflection of the society. The society almost becomes a character in itself, because things are happening, and you're responding to those things. So when you go to sell plantain chips, when you go to sell, I think, donuts and things like that, the struggles that you're having is all part of this canon, this builders romance. Is you have to face conflict to get to the other side. So all of these things, everybody, the conflict is different for everybody. But it's interesting. I was reading and thinking of this young man who's supposed to be in school, and he's selling to his classmates, to his classmates, and then as you start to read, it doesn't keep you in, it doesn't make you pity the character for long, because then comes Mr. Scott, so you see these stop and starts, hills and valleys of this character's life, which is all part of this builder's romance, because you are maturing. Every piece of life or conflict that life throws at you, you are maturing. So I would like to come to some of the like Doris, Doris, what's her name? Kimmy?
McKinney, yes.
McKinney,
Yeah.
Ruth, right? Esther, Cynthia, right?
Yeah.
I wrote it down. There were so many. Martha, right? All of these women, you see them as, yes, there may be, as we say, some flaws in them, but they are all strong women, in their own rights. They're strong women. So if we're looking at this, I see this novel not only as a coming of age of Baba Sharif, it's also a coming of age of people in the novel as well, in this memoir as well.
Wow.
I mean, there are some, like, I forgot. I think it's Esther. Like, your father leaves some of the women; they fight on their own. Kimmy. She loses her son, and Ruth tells her to go, but she's strong. Although she doesn't show love, she's strong. So I don't see these women as women to be pitied. I see them as adjusting to what role society puts for the woman at the time, but also pushing boundaries, because if you look at Kimmy, she may not show you what love is, but I'm sure she knows, she shows love for her son, so all of these things, made the novel very interesting. When I was reading it, I would go back and say, oh, my Martha, oh, Esther, so for me, the characters, most of them were very flushed out. You could sympathize, you could clap for them when something went right. So I think, I mean, for me, that's one portion of the novel that I really like. Yeah. So was it your intention to, I mean, I know it's your life, but surely you must see now that you're on the other side, you have matured. You must see that these women also aided you in the maturation process. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I love your analysis. I think you captured that so well. And I think that's the beauty of literature, right? Because each of us have a way of interpreting things that we think fit into that narrative. And that is so beautifully said the way you said it. One thing I did not want to do, I did not want to not humanize each of the characters in the book.
Yeah.
I wanted Mama Tat to still feel like, she was such a strong person. And, like I mentioned in the book, one of the things I really admire from her, I think she taught me a lot about perseverance when it comes to seeking your education no matter what. Because here is a woman who was already married to my father. She was wife number three, and she's living in this polygamous household. But yet she chose and told my dad, look, I want to leave the village. I want to move to the city to go to school. So here she was. She would prepare the donuts in the morning. I'll go sell it, and then in the afternoon, when I'm going to school, when I come back, she's going to school. She was attending night school, so she was doing something that I admire so much that I just like, man, I want that, And so Martha has that. I mean, she has that character that I wanted to show this human side of her. And my Esther, I wanted to bring this human side of her as well, that she was not just this all brutal person, but she had those moments that when she was all dressed up and be all beautiful, get ready for church and do her Christian thing, such a beautiful thing. I wanted people to see that. The duality of who these individuals were. I wanted people to see that. I did not want to paint a picture of, you know, things were all bad and gloomy. I wanted people to really see that it was a beautiful life to have, at least at the time that I had it.
Uh, One of the temptations that people have when they move, many people, when they move from one phase of life to another or from one society to the other, especially when the second society is supposed to hold all there is to perfection and all that kind of a thing. There is sometimes a language of condescension that comes along. Now, we're talking about the wives of your. Now, because we have to be able to put, for instance, polygyny in context, or polygamy as generally they call it. Now, at some point, you say that these women are your father's mistresses. How long did it take you to come to the point that these were not wives as your father considered them, but as mistresses? It is important for us to understand the vocabulary that kind of slips in, so that being able to kind of situate a lot of these things, we will be convinced about the kind of language we use. So what says you if someone says that you have a bit of the language of condescension in your work?
Yeah, so basically, thank you, Professor. I think basically what I would say, I will not want to disagree with that person. However, I will want that person to take a second read on the book, because in each of those book, I mean, with each of those individuals, I don't think there's any moment in the story where I refer to them as concubines or girlfriends. I refer to all of them as mother. Matter of fact, the chapters I call them Ma Esther, Ma Martha. I consider all of them as mothers, and so they were all mothers to me as far as I know, and even up to today, they were all wives to my father as well, as far as I know. I did not even know any better to think there is something called girlfriend versus wife. I did not know, have that better sense at the time. But the only time that I can say that I realized something was different, when it was in the story, as I mentioned, I had gone to visit a friend of mine, Roosevelt, and this friend, he went to their household for the first time, and in the household, it was just one woman, one father, and the siblings. And so that was when I remember asking Roosevelt, why does your father have only one wife? So I mean, that is mentioned in the story. And again, all of this happened in the context of I have been used to seeing all of these wonderful women around me who served my dad, who were wonderful wives to him. And seeing for the first time that there was a household with just one wife was something that actually puzzled me. And this was when I knew that, okay, this also existed. And take into consideration, this was before I even moved to the city. This happened all in number 4 district, Grand Bassa County. And this was before going to the city. So yeah, I never want to come across as seeing any of those individuals as girlfriends or concubines, because they were not. They were all mother and wives to my father.
I'm glad that you explained that, because it was a point in the book that this phrase of my father's mistresses came out, and that was kind of given the picture you had painted of these ladies in there. And when I saw that phrase in the book, it was kind of jolting.
Oh,
This is not to say, of course, you are you are the painter of your world. This is not to take away from that, but simply to indicate that one of the things that we want to make sure is happening in, especially the African, in a new world, so to speak. It would be a good thing, you know, to have a vocabulary that matches. Is it a must? Well, probably it's not a must, but when you put all pieces, because actually this book is one of a kind of example of stream of consciousness. At some point, one thinks that the parts of the whole are so scattered that they are meaninglessly scattered. But of course, they are scattered with a purpose in mind. That is the beautiful thing about the stream of consciousness technique that comes out in writing, such as you have here. So that if one is looking at all the parts and saying, oh, this is what this person thought at this particular time, or this is how, and through this process, this person matured, and therefore, there was an added value of knowledge as far as understanding the world is concerned. In a village, for instance, a child may be eating with hands. Of course, I know that nowadays in the city, people, there are traditionalists that have become brazen enough to even eat with hands in the city. All right, so that eating with hands, which is part of the culture, is not now limited to the rural regions of the world. So what the key thing is that it 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 is a beautiful thing, for instance, for those who are interested in not only language but also in cultural development, and in other words, the cognitive development in a particular culture, to understand which phase of life one is in, and how one understands that, and over time, what maturity comes on that, and then being able to explain, hey, this is what I held. At that time, I respected it for what it was. I may not have, but I respected it for what it was. And now, yes, I can move on to other things, almost like talking about Paul now. When I was little, I understood things as they were. Now that I've grown, that sort of a thing.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for that input. I appreciate that. Yeah.
One of the other things, following up on Prof. Nangbe's talking about words and naming. In the book, names are very important.
That's right.
And I look at the art of naming throughout the book as also going through a process. You're Baba Sharif. People disempower you by putting Freetown Sharif or Freetown Baba.
Yeah.
So that's an element of disempowerment, or that's what they try to do. And then you are Augustine Sharif, and Augustine means great, increase, right?
Yeah.
So that's what you are. So your loved ones, you are Sanyang, which means dear,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So you see the naming, because first you say it hurts you when they call you Fritan Baba. But as Augustine and then Sanyang, you realize that really Baba or Fritan Baba has no power to hurt you anymore, because where you are in your maturation stage from this process of growth,
Right.
it has made you realize that that was something that somebody tried to weaken you on your on a process, as process on a process towards growth, so it's interesting reading it and saying, they even the names. But I read the book, and I realized also that there are instances of growth that is really not apparent to the naked eye, to somebody who's just reading. Because if you look at it, in the beginning, you said you never looked your father in the face. And for me, that was a no-no. I would never look at my father in the face, because that was very disrespectful.
That's right.
But as time went on, you looked Esther in her face. The anger with which you had, you said murderous intent, you looked her in the face. So you've moved now, and not only have you moved, your mannerisms have moved, your habits, your practices have moved, your name is moving. So it is the entire person who's growing. It's not Augustine Sharif only, it's the things that make up Augustine Sharif. His feelings, his emotions, the names, everything now is coming to this resolution at the end, which is, as we say, this coming of age novel. So I thought that was, and I like the some of the way you describe, like you said, life is slippery. And I'm like, oh my God, it's true, life is slippery. And you talk about what did you say? I wrote it down. You said restraint and intimacy. And I'm like, oh, restraint and intimacy. So the way you play on words, for me, I thought that you described Doris perfectly. I could see Doris in my mind. I could see Doris as every one of these women who are knitting to send shawls to Syria or to the refugee camp, but they don't want to go there, but they will knit it, but they wouldn't want to visit their neighbor down the street, but they will do it. And
Yeah.
now they are there, but they're within these walls, and they are never ever going to go outside. But through you, they want to know what life is outside,
That's
but
right.
they are not brave enough to go and find out for themselves. So for me, the coming of age novel and the coming of age where I say some of the women went through this. For Doris, I would say her coming of age is through you. She gets to know about the world outside the American embassy walls. So it's very interesting. I found that for some reason I found that the men in the novel, you treated the men were much nicer to you. Mr. Scott, I mean, not that the women weren't, but Mr. Scott was a very nice man.
Yes.
The Richard was nice, right? And Kafa, is his name Kafa?
Yeah.
Kafa?
Kafa, yeah.
Yeah. And even the little soldier, he was nice to you, So it's a coming of age memoir in a lot of ways, not just for the main character, but for the people that surrounds the main character, and for events that happen while the character was in there. Yeah. Prof, do you have anything to add before we go to comments?
Uh, Again, I come back to a question that I asked, but then Brother Sheriff discussed it within the context of himself. I wanted to get a sense of the spread of the demography, the men, women, and say which sector, which sector made the most impact And as we are seeing in here, I mean, listening to it seems to, of course, you are at liberty to. It seems to me that the women had the most impact. The women had the most impact on the changing scenes of Brother Sheriff's life. Yes, the men, as well, we have in the title, the nature of shadows. Yes, everyone was shadowing the other, but I think the women's shadow grew stronger as he moved from one phase of his life to the other. After we read comments, I'd like us to focus on a specific thing, something we did with Vamba, which is this whole idea of connotation and denotation. There are three key words that come up in the book, the memoir: home, family, and country. When we come back, we want to find out from you how would you now explain the word family, the word the word family, the word home, and the word country as we move on.
At
Okay.
Focus on Liberia, we discuss everything Liberia, from education to politics, arts and culture, entertainment, agriculture, history, religion, family, and technology. Focus on Liberia uncovers and showcases the best of Liberia and shows the world the truth about Liberia. We educate, elevate, and promote all things Liberia. We conduct interviews, panel discussions, debates, and more. Tune in to Focus on Liberia on Facebook and YouTube and be a part of the stories that make up the news.
This is Focus on Liberia, and I am Dennis Jar.
Yes. So
So Prince Bosua says he's joining us from Ganta City, Nima County. Thank you, Prince, and welcome. Stanley Sayon say he's watching.
Thank you, Stanley.
Says Francis that she downloaded the book, was only able to get the first chapter, and read Crazy Day. Actually loved his writing style for Doris. Was about to start Sata when I got a reminder from the person who had an appointment with. You should finish reading it, says Francis.
Thank you, Miss Francis.
So she says, why would you restrict your writing to an age group? There is nothing new under the sun. So any season you're passing through, either a reader is approaching that season or has passed through that season. I'm tempted to leave the discussion because I want to be surprised, and you guys are giving away all the juice of the story. Is this your first novel? Says Francis, we will not get this ending away. Nothing. We're just discussing some of the elements of the book. We are not giving it away. We're not.
And yes, to answer the question, that's my very first one, and I'm still working on my short stories and my collection of poems. Yes.
And again, I just want to make sure, I just want to give a caveat that even though the word novel, as I said, is generally used loosely, and short stories are getting to be the point of being used loosely as well, we from a different phase of creativity and writing, we have to simply make sure you keep that in, that a short story is not something that you've said about yourself. The element of high creativity, that you will almost immediately pull things from almost thin air and construct that within the context of that genre, is very much important, so that you understand this whole idea of fiction and nonfiction and things like that.
Sure.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, I don't know whether we have another comment before we come to looking at these terms: family, home, and country.
Says Francis that she will finish it. Absolutely. But we are not going to give anything away. We're discussing, of course, we're discussing the characters in the book. But says Francis, we are not giving the ending away. We're not doing anything. In fact, thank you for reminding me. I'm not going there. So we're not going there. We're going to discuss the three terms now.
So for you, brother Sherry, having gone through all these layers of social interactions and what have you, what what for you, what does family mean for you? What does home mean for you? What does country mean? Should we look at these terms within the physical sense, or see something metaphysical about these terms? And having come so far in life here,
Sure.
in a place, for instance, you still feel a little, unwelcome and what have you. So how do you bring it all together? What do you learn, or what have you learned from the real meaning and the made up meaning of words like family, home, and country?
Thank you so much. And I think, like we usually say, home is where the heart is, right? And so basically, you are absolutely on point, Professor. I think one of the things that I struggled with early on, and you will see that throughout the book, was this sense of belonging. And that really started within my house, my father's household, our household. By the time I was a certain age, my biological mother was no longer in the picture. So I was now with the rest of my stepmoms and my father, single person there. And so that was our household. But in some sense, I didn't think I belonged to any one person in the household.
Mhm.
That sense of belonging was not there for me. And then when we go to school, there was this whole idea of both of my parents came from Sierra Leone. And because they came from Sierra Leone, I was born in Liberia. I still carry that sense with me. Does that make me a Liberian, or is home Sierra Leone? And then of course the journey follow. You come to the United States, and here you are. You get green card or whatever, find yourself established. But still, when you go out the door, you are completely different from your person who sit next to you at the office. Does that make you American? Is that where the heart is? And so this sense of belonging is something you'll find throughout the book. And for me, at this particular age in my life, I have learned to know that family is that unit, that structure where you find yourself, wherever you are, whether it is a man and another man, or if it's a woman and a woman, but where you have that place that you can come and recline and say, look, this is family. And that is how I have come to define family. I have come to not look at the biological piece of it to say that is the person who gave me birth, but I look at the whole village around me, and to me that has become family. And for country, again, I still struggle with this. I'm not even going to pretend about that. I still struggle with this. I still claim Liberia. That was where I was born. That's home, right? Liberia is home. And I got some projects I'm doing in Liberia. However, I still think about my parents' heritage in Sierra Leone. It is still a burden of mine to one day go to Sierra Leone to trace that heritage. And so to define home, home is clearly Liberia. That's where I belong. And if by God's grace something happened, I would love to go back and be buried over there. That's home. And then, when it comes to country, of course, I think it is very similar to how I would define, uh, you know, home. I will always be someone who is defined by my nationality. I'm Liberian. So I can tell someone I'm American by naturalization, but they will always want to know their origin. That origin is always going to be Liberia for me. And so, home and country, I proudly carry the Liberian flag in my car. And so, those are the things I'm very, very proud of when I speak to people about who I am. Matter of fact, when I was responding to what Liberia means to me, in my essay, I specify those things. That is what Liberia is. I describe the dust, the sand, the clay soil, all of these things that Liberia is. Reminding myself with barefoot playing football with my friends. That is the essence of Liberia. So I will always carry Liberia with me. And those terms, that's how I look at them.
The just as I thought through what Vamas said the last time and what you are saying, and of course looking at what others around the world have written about migration and all that, and belonging, a sense of belonging. I believe we are in an age, especially with the strength of transportation, uh, the system of transportation, and all that. I believe that people who move from one place to the other, they carry what I call the beautiful sense of conundrum. So
Yes.
that is a charming conundrum that you all face, and it creates a human community. It creates a human community that moves from one sphere of life to the other, moves from one area of life to the other, and in that process, it enhances, it broadens the vista of the understanding of what humanity is. So that's very much important as far as looking at the book is concerned, Jackie.
And the sense of community is I mean, even like you said, with the technological age, community is mobile. You can take it with you. And I mean, Bamba and I, when we discussed this with you, Prof, I said to them that, fitting in, where you fit in doesn't necessarily mean where you belong. You can fit in somewhere, but that doesn't mean you belong there. And you're right about this conundrum, because it's almost like it is like this waiting place, right? Augustine, is this limbo that you find yourself in. It's going home and then longing for here, and going here and longing for there. So it's either you make peace with this duality that we discuss, or you end up moving to the place where you belong, but maybe don't fit anymore because you've left, and you have taken on the mannerisms and the habits of the other place. So you could either be returning to look for this thing that you've lost, and you may never find it, because sometimes when you go back to where you think you belong, you find out that you are more alone there than ever, because the people there, they may not change in very significant ways, but you have. I remember reading Mandela's autobiography, where he says that there's nothing like returning to where you lived before, to find out how much you've changed.
Hmm.
Oh, you've changed totally. So I like, when I go home, sometimes I see people who, they really want to fit in, so they exaggerate themselves. So whereas you're sitting eating and music is playing, a Liberian who lives in Liberia will just walk in and find food and eat, right?
Yeah.
This person will come from the diaspora, and they walk in and they will hear the music, and then they'll start dancing, as almost to say, look at me, I belong. But other people are not doing that. You're doing it to fit in, because you're trying so desperately to belong. So this question of your essence is one that really, we discussed it last week, that the writers before, like Chinua Achebe and the others, they talk about war and conflict. They talk about the community, the African village, the new breed of writers. You guys who are the new breed of writers, your themes are more a coming of age, yes, maybe fiction or non-fiction, but it's more of this cosmopolitan mobile,
Hmm.
that you are, and you're trying to say, okay, I can think of what has impacted my life as a child. But this conundrum that Prof is talking about will always be with you. This duality will be there, that when, because you have left. and returning is not the same as remaining, right?
That's right.
Remain, they've changed. Those who are returning have changed. Both of you have changed. So now if you met Ma Esther, it's going to be a different relationship, you know. So I think that as writers, either we come to terms with this duality and say, you know what, we can live with it.
Yeah. And I think
Yeah.
And I think that's such a good point, because I think there's a section in the book where I also mentioned there's this line that I remember correctly put in the book, which is, I had left and I had been left.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
and so basically, that was, when I made reference to that phrase, it was me
And
saying,
that's the one I highlighted, page 218.
yeah, so that's the one I had mentioned, that I had just left my father's house. I had left
Yes.
that behind me, and I was going to forge this new life at the age of 12, and then found this family that took me in. They were going to do everything for me, and they too left and moved to the United States. So my whole idea of left and being left, I think you just kind of really exemplify that feeling of, oh man, I thought I was returning to this place that I know, but this place that I know, I still do not fit in this place at this point in time at all. So
Yeah.
I think we all said you capture it very well.
And there's an anger there, really. I mean, I read books and like I tell Prof, every time I start to write my book, I put it down, because this is a biography of my great grandmother. But I think there's an anger there, and you touch on that in the novel, because like you say, you left and you were left. So the art of leaving, if it is not of your own accord, there is anger.
Yeah.
And I think coming to terms with that anger will help a great way in when we say we are going back, because a lot of time we say, oh, we're going back. Yeah, going back to what? I often say that before you say I'm going back, you have to really steel yourself and say, okay, this is what I know will not be there. This is what will be there. And let me make peace with the fact that I was left, because when people go back, they think everything will be perfect, and it will not be, and that is the nature of the coming of age novel. You have matured, and going back should not be going back to point zero to say, let me go and look for something. Life has happened to you. You have gone through the process. You have come out. The hero has come out. The hero has prevailed. There's no reason for the hero to go back to point zero and become the victim again. And sometimes going back makes you the victim, and so you have to say, this return, and probably I'm kind of like my stream of consciousness is going, but you can say, this return that I'm returning, it is not to make apologies for leaving.
That's right.
It is not to hate for being left. It is simply to go to this place that I once belonged and see if there is a place for me now. And I always think that there may not be, there may be that you have outgrowing this space and this place. And it's up to the writer or the person to make peace with that.
Right.
I will come and visit, but this is no longer my home. It may be my country, but my home is with my loved ones, or in my mind where it's somewhere else. But I think that this conflict is not indigenous, let me put it that way, to Liberians alone. I was discussing it the other day with my friend, and he said, I wrote my entire dissertation on this for South Asia refugees. It's the same thing. Leaving home creates chaos.
Right.
And I think that in some ways you explain that in the novel, and I think that at the end, I hope at the end that the coming of age, you have come of age and you have made peace with, if not peace, Prof says the sweet conundrum.
Yeah, it was a struggle, and I think in one of the chapters I actually mentioned that struggle where a friend of mine that we went to school together, had actually very close, and I always wanted to stay in touch with friends in Liberia. And this friend had told me that, oh man, you are a traitor because you left your country, and you took up residency in another country. And I mentioned that in the book, and my purpose for putting that in the book was this in-war fight I was having. I still wanted to hold on to Liberia. I still want to hold on to the friends I had. But it was very obvious to me that they had moved on, and I was able to now accept the fact and make peace with who I was, and I
Yes.
needed to move on. So that was part of the journey as well.
Yes, and the hero does in the process. The hero does not keep going back.
That's
You
right.
see, that's that in you are coming of age.
Yeah.
So the things that bog you down, and I mean it in the best way. I mean, I'm not saying that they bog you down, but but I guess the friend was giving you permission to loosen the chain, you know, because sometimes we find that when we leave, we are constantly making apologies for leaving, you know. And I would say that if you left through no fault of your own, there is no reason to apologize, you know. So yeah, I read that part in the book. Yeah, Prof. I'm sorry. Yes, Prof.
Okay, I mean, talking about this what you call this internal struggle, this psychological struggle or what have you. I thought just as a way of probably, I mean, probably if he found that paragraph or so, probably he would read it for the hearing of the audience and what have you. So
Yeah. Augustine, on page 218.
Yeah.
If you read the first paragraph and then you go to the next page, 219, and then I remembered, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, those are the two paragraphs we would like for you to read.
All right. So page 218, paragraph 1. Right. So
Yes.
I have left and I have been left. Sometimes Liberia exists in the far reaches of my mind. So ingrained am I into the American culture. I wear a Yankees ball cap, drive a Japanese import, and wrestle with how to fill my weekends because I no longer exist to keep starvation at bay. Sometimes I receive correspondence from an ocean away that talks about Liberianness as if it is a disease from a third world country that I may not want to catch. Always, I feel like I left Liberia long after Liberia left me. And page 219. And then I remember I had lost heroes, best friends, fathers who never were. The pain was unbearable at times, and I was tired of traveling, always looking. Maybe home is maybe home in this life was simply finding others to which belonging was a choice. Other stars that were luminous and dying in the hopes that gravity would hold together. You are on mute, Miss Turkey. I'm sorry.
I said, could you continue reading? If you give me a chance, I want to keep reading, please.
Oh, okay, okay. I'm sorry. I couldn't hear. All right. If you give me a chance, I want to stay. I told her. I have traveled as far as you, and I believe we have arrived. How can you be sure? She whispered. I'm not sure, but I think we can get there together. We say our vows the next summer. She calls me Sayang, Indonesian for dear, another to add to my list of names.
One paragraph. I don't know how the definition of resilience. That's the last paragraph I want you to please read.
Okay. I don't know the definition of resilience. I am careful not to invest too much into any one event. Quite possibly, that philosophy of self preservation will never leave me. People have become my currency, the one who remain and the ones I will never see again. I do not take this American dream come true lightly. The heavy weight of a hopeful people is never a burden.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's very good. Prof,
yeah,
what do you think?
okay, that's fine. I
Yeah.
mean, The thing, the important thing about writing is not the content, but what you make of the content, or what you direct the reader. What you direct the reader. It may not be brazen. It may not be overt. But when someone writes, puts details together, and as a way of summing the details, provides either a psychological path or a philosophical path, then that particular writing is rich. You see, because actually what writing does is it creates a map, especially writing about one's life or another person's life. What it does is that it helps enhance the map, because actually we all are on the path wanting several maps or one huge map by which we take the journey. So the writer being able to so digest and so distill certain components of the content to create a philosophy, to create a psychology of thought is very much important. And that's what I see coming out in the memoir that Brother Sharif has given to the world.
It means a lot, Professor. Thank you.
And Augustine, I would like to know, how did you choose the title of the book, The Nature of Shadows?
I love that. I think the professor alluded to everybody shadowing, people coming in, passing, going through. But the true title of that book comes from a chapter that is titled Jebe, which was the name of my biological mother. And basically, the only picture I had of my biological mother growing up in my father's house was a picture I have found in a shoebox at in our house. And in that picture, she is sitting in front of an almond tree, and she does have a child on her lap. And that child, I come to know, was me. She has this baby in her lap. She's sitting in front of the almond tree. And when you look at the photograph, the way the sun hits the tree, if it casts a shadow right over my mother. So in that picture, she's not smiling, but she has this look on her face. And basically, there is that essence of this nature of shadow. The way the shadow is cast, you can never predict it. However, though, it says a lot about you find solace, you find peace, and you find a lot of comfort in that shade. And that is where the title of the book actually comes from.
Yeah, and sometimes shadows are larger than the person.
That's right. Taller.
Largest So yeah, I found that the essence of home as the almond tree is quite interesting. Yeah. So if we can please have the novel up one more time, so we can tell our audience to please purchase the novel. Sis Francis have already purchased the novel. She's reading it on Kindle. So please, we would like for you to join us, audience, to discuss the various novels. So if you have time, please purchase The Nature of Shadows, an African memoir, Augustine Sharif and L.A. Mitchell. It's on Amazon. Please purchase it and read it. Support your own, support a Liberian. Is actually a very interesting read, a coming of age novel. Sis Francis says she likes your writing style. So
thank you.
So, we will encourage you to keep writing. As you continue your book of poetry, we will invite you again to come and talk to us. We encourage Liberians to write. Prof. Nangbe, as you know, he's our mentor. He's been encouraging all of us to write. So every time we write, we want Prof to approve of it before we can.
That's right. That's why I try to make my way to the professor and I say, hey, I got a collection I want you to look at.
We've gone more than an hour. We would like to, we can't discuss all of the book because people are going to buy the book. We're going to keep this thing up. I'm going to put it back on my page. You guys purchase the book. and then we can discuss it again. Maybe we can do an extension of it. We would like to thank you very much. It's a very thought-provoking book about belonging, about home, your place in this world. Francis C. Wilson says another element is that people have a tendency in Liberia to hear they seem to believe that they have the right to define who a Liberian is. I find it amusing to hear a child born yesterday dictating to people who have lived 60 to 80 years that they are the other and don't belong.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, this question of belonging is at the heart of, I guess, the dual citizenship and all of the other things that are coming out of the country.
Yeah.
But I would like to say thank you, Augustine. We really enjoyed this hour. We hope you can join us again for your poetry, and Prof can dissect it with his with his discerning eye. We are very grateful to you for joining us today, and for our audience. As I said, read the book. Those of you who have not sent your essay or your letter or your poem on what Liberia means to me, please do that soon. Augustine did his, so please do yours. We're waiting for more entries. Prof, do you have closing comments before Augustine?
One of the things I am taking interest in as far as this hour is concerned is that of self-analysis and self-appreciation. Whether it is in the area of fiction or non-fiction, I think understanding humanity is very much important. Understanding humanity is very much important. In many years gone by, the James Baldwin, the Henry James, and all these people, they wrote an American in foreign land, an American in strange land. And those of this generation that have begun to experience that, Americans abroad, they would say, here we have Africans abroad. And all these things, the same story of the question of who am I? What link do I have with other human beings? And how does the understanding enrich my own life? These are important questions because they tap into the value system that is supposed to enhance progress, that is supposed to kind of advance progress. So we should be able to appreciate such conversations in the case of Brother Sheriff Augustine, in the case of Vamba, and several others. So let us keep on writing. Let us keep on appreciating ourselves and appreciating others. And let us keep working very hard so that the life we live and the legacy, hopefully sometime we'll leave, will become a strong testament that God did not put us in this world for nothing.
And that is why I'm so grateful, that you guys created this platform, because, it is such a wonderful, refreshing thing. There are so many platforms out there, but politics is like the biggest thing. But to have a platform where literature is really discussed, where we have Liberians encouraged to share their writings, and I think it's such a wonderful thing. One of my favorite authors I always read, Aminata Fona. She said something, and I quote. She said, "If you want to know a country, read its writers." And so it is such a wonderful thing for Liberians to be encouraged to write and to be able to tell their stories, because if we don't tell our stories, someone else is going to tell it, and then we're going to talk about cultural appropriation. So
Yes.
we
Yep.
need to write our own stories. Thank you guys so much for doing this.
Okay. We want to tell our viewers thank you. As we always say, mask up. Have a safe weekend, and don't forget, whether you're a reader or not, whether you have achieved the American dream or you're in Liberia, whether you are contemplating going to get your green card, whether you're contemplating returning home, there's one thing, one common core. We're all Liberians. So we thank you. We ask you to join us next week and be safe. And
we are Liberians.